Okay, let's really deep dive into this. What actually happens inside our brains when we start handing over some of our thinking, some of our cognitive heavy lifting, to an artificial intelligence?
Right.
Does leaning on tools like ChatGPT make us less competent, maybe less capable, or does it simply make us incredibly efficient, freeing us up for other things?
That's the core question, isn't it?
And how does relying on an AI assistant truly compare to, say, a good old-fashioned Google search, or perhaps just relying on your own brilliant mind?
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're embarking on a fascinating deep dive into a groundbreaking study from MIT, aptly titled Your Brain on ChatGPT: Accumulation of Cognitive Debt When Using an AI Assistant for Essay Writing Tasks.
That's a really provocative title.
It is. And this research isn't just about what appears on the page. It gives us an unprecedented glimpse into the very real cognitive costs of integrating large language models, or LLMs, into academic writing.
Exactly. We're talking brain activity.
Yeah, we're talking about their effects on our brain activity, our learning processes, and even our fundamental sense of ownership over what we create. Our mission today is to unpack the surprising facts, the implications, and ultimately to help you understand this rapidly evolving relationship between human and AI intelligence.
So to set the stage for this truly insightful investigation, the MIT study had a very clear purpose.
Okay.
They wanted to meticulously examine the cognitive cost, or you could say the mental trade-offs, of using an LLM like ChatGPT within an educational setting, specifically looking at essay writing.
Right, because that's a common use case.
Precisely. They weren't just observing the output, the final essay. They wanted to understand the neurological shifts happening as people engage with this new technology.
And the way they designed this experiment was quite ingenious, really. They started with 54 participants initially, though 18 completed all 4 sessions over 3 months.
Which is important for consistency.
Absolutely. These participants were initially split into 3 distinct groups. You had the LLM group, who used ChatGPT for their essay writing.
Okay.
Then there was the search engine group, using traditional web search.
The sort of standard digital approach before LLMs, maybe?
Exactly. And finally, the brain-only group, who tackled their essays without any digital tools at all. Just them and the task.
Pure cognition, basically.
It's almost like a controlled experiment to see which mental muscles get exercised or perhaps which ones get a bit neglected.
That's a perfect way to frame it. And to really see what was going on beneath the surface, they employed a really sophisticated set of measurement techniques.
Okay, like what?
First and foremost was EEG, electroencephalography.
Right, measuring brain waves.
Exactly. It's non-invasive. They place electrodes on the scalp, and it lets them record the brain's electrical activity. So they could assess cognitive engagement, cognitive load, basically how hard the brain was working, and reveal specific neural activations.
So like listening in on the brain's conversation.
Kind of like that, yeah. Listening to the symphony, seeing which sections are playing loudly and working together.
So they were actually seeing the brain at work in real time.
Precisely. Tracking those brainwave patterns.
Yeah.
Beyond that, they used NLP, natural language processing.
To analyze the essays themselves?
Yes, to deeply analyze the linguistic patterns within the essays, spotting subtle differences in vocabulary, structure, even the conceptual focus.
Interesting.
They also conducted in-depth interviews after each session. That was crucial for getting the subjective side, how participants felt about the work, their effort, their sense of authorship.
Right, the human element.
And finally, every essay was scored by 2 quite different evaluators.
Yeah.
Human teachers and a specially built AI judge.
Okay, comparing human versus AI assessment. Now, here's where the study introduces a truly critical twist, the kind that really puts this concept of cognitive debt under the microscope. Session 4.
Ah, yes, the swap.
Exactly. This is where they basically swapped roles for 2 of the groups. The original LLM group was asked to write without any tools. Suddenly, their AI support was gone. The LLM-to-Brain group.
A tough transition, potentially.
And conversely, the original brain-only group was asked to use an LLM for the first time. They became the Brain-to-LLM group.
That comparison is key.
It really allowed the researchers to observe the immediate impact of both AI withdrawal and that initial AI exposure.
It's a brilliant way to try and understand causality, to see how these habits, once formed, impact performance when things change.
Definitely.
Now, it's really vital to add an important caveat here. These are preliminary findings as of June 2025. The paper hasn't yet undergone full peer review.
Okay, good point. So compelling, but needs that final scientific check.
Right. We should approach them with that appropriate level of scientific caution. And also, the study had some limitations, like any study.
Such as?
Well, the participant pool was limited, drawn from a specific area. Only ChatGPT was used, so we don't know if other AIs would produce the same results.
True, different models behave differently.
And crucially, the findings are highly context-dependent. It's essay writing, educational setting. They may not fully generalize to, say, coding or creative writing or professional tasks just yet.
Got it. So keep the context in mind. But despite those caveats, what the study revealed next about brain activity patterns was, well, truly illuminating.
It really was.
They found consistent, robust evidence that each group's brain was literally wired differently based on the tools they used. Significantly divergent neural connectivity patterns, different cognitive strategies lighting up.
Absolutely. The differences in neural connectivity, measured by EEG, were profoundly striking. Let's start with the brain-only group.
Okay, the baseline, in a way.
Right. These participants consistently showed the strongest, most complex, and widest-ranging brain networks. They had the highest total connectivity across different brainwave frequencies, alpha, theta, delta.
So more parts of the brain talking to each other.
Essentially, yes. Especially in key areas like the temporal-parietal regions, involved in meaning, and the frontal executive regions for planning and monitoring. It indicates deep semantic integration, creative idea generation, and strong self-monitoring. Their brains were working hard, connecting ideas internally.
Firing on all cylinders, generating the content themselves.
That's a good way to put it. They were deeply engaged in that internal cognitive effort.
Okay, so their brains were really doing the heavy lifting, forging those connections.
Exactly. Then we have the search engine group.
The middle ground.
Kind of. They showed intermediate engagement. Their total connectivity was about 34–48% lower than the brain-only group.
Still a significant drop.
Definitely. But what was particularly interesting here was increased activity in their occipital and visual cortices.
The parts for seeing.
Right, which reflects their active scanning, selecting, evaluating visual information from the web browser. Their brains were busy processing external data, deciding what's relevant, and then integrating it.
Makes sense. They're finding and filtering information. And finally, the LLM group. The ones really leaning on ChatGPT. How did their brains look?
Well, the LLM group elicited the weakest overall brain coupling. It was quite a drop.
How much?
Up to 55% reduced total connectivity compared to the brain-only group, especially in those low-frequency networks linked to semantics and monitoring.
Wow, over half the connectivity gone in some key areas.
Yes, and their cognitive loads seemed to shift. Less towards deep thinking, more towards procedural integration and motor coordination like managing the tool.
So more about interacting with the AI than generating the core ideas.
It suggests a more automated, scaffolded mode of thinking. Significantly reduced reliance on their own internal semantic construction, their own idea building. Put simply, their brains were less involved in building arguments or generating novel ideas from scratch.
It's like a major part of the mental heavy lifting was bypassed.
That's what the neural patterns suggest.
So, if their brains were working less intensely in those deep semantic pathways, what did that actually look like in their work? What about the real-world outcomes, like authorship and memory? How did they feel about their essays?
The differences here were truly stark, quite telling. Let's talk essay ownership.
Okay.
The brain-only group, almost unanimous full ownership. They felt, this is my work. Real pride, real agency.
That is the aspect.
The search engine group also showed strong ownership, but maybe with a little less certainty, often reporting like 70–90% partial authorship, which makes sense, right? They integrated external info but synthesized it themselves.
Oh, wait, they still shaped it.
Critically, though, the LLM group presented a really fragmented, often conflicted sense of authorship. Many assigned only partial credit, maybe 50%, sometimes up to 90%. But there was this clear indication of diminished cognitive agency.
They didn't feel like it was entirely theirs.
Exactly. And this lined up perfectly with the EEG data, showing reduced activation in their anterior frontal regions, the brain areas involved in self-evaluation, recognizing your own contribution.
Wow, so their brains weren't even fully registering it as their own creation.
It seems that way. It suggests they hadn't fully internalized the content as something they authentically produced.
And what about memory? Could they recall what they wrote?
This is maybe even more striking. The quoting ability of LLM users was profoundly impaired.
How bad was it?
In Session 1, a staggering 83% reported significant difficulty quoting their own essays. And astonishingly, none of them provided correct quotes.
None.
Zero correct quotes in the first session. And this difficulty persisted throughout their LLM use. It linked directly back to that reduced low-frequency connectivity in their brains.
So the lack of deep processing meant no strong memory trace.
It suggests a bypassing of crucial deep memory encoding processes. If your brain isn't deeply wrestling with the content generation, it's not laying down those robust retrievable memories.
Makes sense. And the other groups?
Stark contrast. Search engine and brain-only participants achieved near-perfect quoting by sessions 2 and 3. They remember their work because they had actively built it, piece by piece.
This is huge. It's not just feelings about ownership, it's actual retention. And you mentioned the NLP analysis showed what they wrote was different too.
Absolutely. The linguistic analysis revealed fascinating biases. The LLM group produced essays that were statistically homogeneous within each topic. Less variation between them.
They all kind of sounded the same.
Pretty much. That sameness is a key indicator. They also tended to use the most specific named entities, people, places, years, definitions, and showed a bias towards third-person forms.
Can you give an example?
Sure. For the philanthropy topic, LLM essays consistently focused around the concept of giving, whereas search engine essays leaned heavily into terms about homelessness, different angles shaped by the tool.
Wow.
And an ontology analysis, which maps how concepts relate, showed a significant conceptual overlap between the LLM and search engine groups, but almost no intersection with the brain-only group.
So the tool users thought similarly but differently from the non-tool users.
Yes. For instance, the brain-only group might touch more on abstract ideas like freedom or liberty within a topic, while the LLM search engine groups focus more directly on things like justice.
That implies the tools aren't just assisting, they're shaping the perspective.
It strongly suggests they are subtly, yet profoundly, shaping the conceptual framework, even the specific arguments presented, not just grammar and structure.
That's a massive insight. If the tools subtly shape our thoughts, not just our words, well, what does that mean for independent thinking? And how did these differently produced essays actually score?
This is where we see that fascinating divergence. Human teachers who are increasingly seeing AI essays were more skeptical.
I could kind of tell.
Often, yes. They recognize the consistent structure, the homogeneity, that sort of AI signature. They were less impressed by the uniqueness.
Okay.
But the AI judge, it consistently scored those same LLM essays higher in uniqueness and quality.
Wait, the AI judge liked the AI essays better?
It seems so, which highlights a critical, maybe concerning discrepancy in what human versus AI evaluators perceive as good or original. What are we optimizing for?
That's a whole other conversation. Okay, let's unpack this next phase, session 4, the role swap. This is really where cognitive debt comes into sharp focus, right?
Absolutely.
Like the GPS analogy. You use it constantly. You get there fast, but you don't build your own mental map. Take away the GPS.
And you might be a bit lost. Session 4 tests exactly that.
So what happened to the LLM-to-Brain group? The ones who lost their AI?
Well, the findings underscore that analogy perfectly. They showed significantly weaker neural connectivity compared to the brain-only group's earlier sessions when doing the same task. They underperformed.
Their brains weren't firing up the same way.
Exactly. They seem to lack that robust frontal-parietal synchronization needed for deep semantic encoding, for pulling up memories effectively. Their essays were often narrower, fewer ideas explored. They struggled to critically examine the material.
So the reliance had consequences.
It reflected impaired long-term semantic retention and contextual memory. This strongly supports the cognitive debt idea. Repeated reliance on external systems like LLMs replaces that effortful internal work.
And there's a long-term cost.
A real cost.
Yeah.
Diminished critical inquiry, maybe more vulnerability to misinformation, decreased creativity, borrowing against your future cognitive abilities.
Wow. So it's not just that they didn't do as well. Their brains literally weren't working in the same deep, generative ways. But what about the other side? The brain-to-LLM group, the ones who started without tools and then got the AI.
That's where we see a fascinating flip. This group showed a significant increase in brain connectivity across all EEG bands when they used the LLM, especially on familiar topics.
An increase. They got more engaged.
Yes. They showed higher memory recall for the underlying material and demonstrated a much more strategic, fine-tuned approach to using the LLM, like expert users, almost immediately.
So having that strong foundation first made the AI a better tool.
It strongly suggests that. Strategic timing matters. Introducing AI after initial self-driven cognitive effort and knowledge building might actually enhance engagement and neural integration. The AI becomes an accelerator, not a replacement, when you already have a strong internal mental model.
So it's clearly not just whether you use the tool, but crucially, when and how you use it, which leads to the big question. Is this cognitive debt reversible? Can you rebuild those mental muscles?
That is indeed the million-dollar question for future research. The study definitely prompts us to consider it deeply. The findings point to a profound trade-off.
Efficiency versus depth.
Exactly. LLMs offer undeniable efficiency. They reduce the friction of writing, but they might unintentionally hinder that deep processing, the robust retention, the authentic engagement, rely too heavily, achieve superficial fluency.
But fail to internalize the knowledge or feel ownership.
Precisely. The debt might not be obvious at first, but the long-term cost could be significant.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, like this review in the conversation mentioned, think about calculators. When they came out, exams got harder.
They did. The expectation shifted.
Students used calculators for complex calculations, freeing up mental energy for higher-level problem solving. The bar was raised. But with AI, it feels like educators haven't widely raised that bar yet.
That's a common observation.
Students often do the same old tasks just now with AI, which can lead to what some call metacognitive laziness, offloading the work without substituting new, higher-level challenges.
That analogy is incredibly precise. And for education, the implication is clear. AI can be beneficial, but maybe primarily if it's used for tasks that were previously impossible, but still demand significant human engagement.
Like your example of using AI for a detailed lesson plan, but then the student has to defend it orally.
Exactly. Something that requires critical evaluation, synthesis, justification. The key is knowing when, where, and how to use AI. Which tasks can be responsibly offloaded, and which fundamentally require the human creativity, critical thinking, deep synthesis.
Designing tasks that elevate, not just replace, thinking.
It's about complementing cognitive development, not bypassing it.
And there are broader societal implications too, right? Beyond just academics. The study mentioned users were less critical of the AI's output.
Yes, that convenience factor seemed to lower critical evaluation. People were less inclined to question the AI's opinions, which are really just probabilistic outputs.
Which feeds into the echo chamber idea, but maybe on steroids?
It's a concerning evolution. If you constantly rely on an AI trained on potentially biased or incomplete data, or data prioritized by its creators, you might subtly let algorithms shape your worldview without even realizing it.
Internalizing biases without critical engagement.
It underscores the profound need for more research, especially longitudinal studies. We need to understand the long-term impact of these LLMs on our brains, our critical faculties, over months and years.
Before we can truly say they're a net positive for human cognition.
Exactly. We need that deeper understanding.
Wow, what an incredibly insightful deep dive into your brain on ChatGPT. It's undeniably clear that our relationship with AI is complex, dynamic, and profoundly impactful. It affects everything from our neural pathways to our sense of authorship.
Indeed. The findings suggest a fascinating, maybe delicate dance between external technological support and our internal, self-driven cognitive synthesis. AI tools offer incredible advantages, efficiency, access.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely vital we consider their potential long-term impact on cognitive development, critical thinking, and our ability to truly master knowledge ourselves.
So here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over as you navigate your own interactions with AI. Is this cognitive debt truly reversible? And if it is, how should our educational systems and even our personal learning habits adapt?
How do we leverage the benefits without the downsides?
Right. How do we leverage AI's immense benefits without inadvertently sacrificing our deeper cognitive capacities, our intellectual independence, and that really profound satisfaction that comes from genuine understanding? How might you rethink your own interaction with AI in learning or work moving forward?